Well, consumers seem to prefer the used car market when buying vehicles. This comes as the new car market saw a 3% decline in sales compared to March last year. Light commercial vehicles did, however, see a massive 11% incline, while passenger vehicles inched up nearly 2%. The number of vehicles exported also increased in March, while purchases by the car rental industry was nearly 3% higher. The average price of cars bought last month stood at just under 310,000 rand. The National Automobile Association believes unchanged interest rates will see the numbers inching up. For some analysis now on vehicle sales, I'm joined by the executive head of Westbank's motor division, that's Simphiwe Ngona. Simphiwe, thanks so much for your time this evening. Rather muted growth locally, but I suppose was to be expected.
Certainly. If one looks at the NAMSA vehicle sales that were released, year on year, the total market is down 3%. The passenger cars the light commercial vehicles up 5.5% and heavy commercials up 8%. So if one also looks or takes into consideration that since post-recession, the motor industry has enjoyed quite an enormous growth in terms of new vehicle sales.
Yeah.
So whilst the growth may be very flat, I think it's prudent for me to mention that we are still experiencing quite a high number, where vehicle sales are concerned.
Why is that? Do we just love buying new cars fresh out of the box as South Africans?
South African consumers do enjoy their cars, and if one breaks down the different segments, the passenger market will include most of the consumers. So if one breaks that down even further, the dealer sales are still pretty strong, because dealer sales were up 1.5% on passenger cars, and they're up on light commercial vehicles by 4.4%, irrespective of the market being flat. So we also track, from a Westbank perspective, incoming application forms, and we've seen a tremendous growth, 20% year-on-year increase on incoming application forms, which does give us an indication that there's a very strong demand for vehicle purchases.
When you drill down into those application forms, what's the state of affordability? How are consumers and customers managing that?
The customers, if one looks at obviously all the other statistics on the other end of the bank, where we obviously collect and where we report arrears, and that they seem to be in control at this point in time. If one also looks at the household debt to income, we have seen some rather reduction, even though a bit sluggish, because consumers are still highly indebted in South Africa as well. I think we're also in a very fortunate position whereby we've got very tight legislation and regulation around how we lend money out to consumers from an affordability point of view.
Yesterday we had Arabile out at a petrol station looking at how people are queuing up to put petrol in day before the first hike of the month, the first day of the month. Does the petrol price have any impact on whether we buy cars or not?
It has, to a certain degree. I'm certain to share with the consumers that the fuel price holiday has come to an abrupt end after the increase of 162 yesterday. Obviously, that's driven by the weak rand. It's also driven by international oil prices, as we purchase oil in dollars as well. So it does, to a large degree, make some form of impact in terms of customers' ability to purchase vehicles. According to Westbank data on motoring costs, almost 50% of the mobility costs of consumers, that's your fuel. If you take into consideration that we look at installment finance or your installment, we look at comprehensive insurance and just normal maintenance costs, e-tolls, and then 50%, almost 50% of it is around fuel. So it does play quite a large degree when people need to purchase vehicles.
And in the used car market, are we seeing any trends on that side? If people are hard pressed to afford 300,000 rand car, for example, are they being pushed towards the used car market?
Well, according to the Westbank data, once again, we've seen a gradual shift towards more the used market. We've seen an increase in terms of incoming application of 22%. In terms of application forms, so that kind of shows that there is quite a lot of demand towards used cars. New cars, we've seen an increase of about 15% year on year on demand for new cars. In terms of the rand values, what's interesting is that as at the end of March 2015, the average rent value finance for used cars is the highest ever we've ever seen at 175,000. So I think what that indicates is that if someone wants to purchase a new car, they look for better value in a used car. And what we've also observed is that customers are actually hanging on longer to their used cars, because the average now, average period is around 37 months, whereas this time last year it was around 32 months.
Okay, so they're wising up. They're wising up to this. And finally, public holidays are the seasonal factors that happen that impact then on these numbers. So are we likely to see some sort of a decline with the next batch that comes out?
We'll normally look at, if you look at April and December in particular as well, you know, with all the public holidays in April, you know, people tend to go on holiday, and they obviously have a preference to spend their money on holidays and that. So if we correlate that or compare that to new vehicle sales, April and December are usually slower than the ordinary trading months. And around about December, obviously, we think people spend their bonuses on holidays and other consumables during that time. So we normally do see quite a slowdown in vehicle sales in those particular months.
And hopefully saving for January and the school fees. Thanks for your time
no problem
today. Executive Head of West Bank's Motor Division, Simpiwe Ngona.